Hi everyone. Okay, so this is going to be chapter 14 of Surprises According to Humphrey. Yesterday I read chapter 13 to you. It's on my YouTube channel. If you didn't get to see it, make sure you do before you listen to this one. It's spring break, and Humphrey and Og are spending spring break with the Brisbanes, and they were both very excited about that. Mrs. Brisbane yesterday went shopping for new clothes, and Mr. Brisbane took Humphrey on a little trip. Said he needed him to help him with an assignment. Humphrey doesn't yet know where he's going, but we're about to find out. Welcome to Maycrest Manor. Before we went inside, Mr. Brisbane covered my cage with a cloth. Just for a few minutes, buddy, he told me. Still, I could peek out just enough to see that Maycrest Manor was a huge building with lots of tall windows, plants, and trees. Inside, I saw people with canes and walkers and wheelchairs, and there were other people in colorful uniforms helping them out. "Hi, Bert," a friendly voice called out. "What have you got there?" He lifted a corner of the cloth and said, "Joyce, meet Humphrey. He is today's entertainment." "Great, you can go right to the recreation room. We'll bring in the folks in about 5 minutes." We took an elevator, which always makes my tummy feel queasy and uneasy, and then entered a great big room with chairs and tables all around. Mr. Brisbane wheeled us over to a table in the center. "The people here are all trying to recover from illnesses and injuries so they can go back home again. I was here for a while last year, and they helped me a lot," Mr. Brisbane explained. "Now I want to help them back. All you have to do is be yourself, Humphrey." "Well, as if I could be anyone else." And soon the people in uniforms helped the people with canes and walkers and wheelchairs come into the room. I peeked out as they all gathered around the table. I was used to having giggly wiggly children around me, but these were tired and serious faces. "Okay, Bert, they're all here," the woman called. "Good morning," said Bert in a cheerier than usual voice. "I brought you a visitor today. His name is Humphrey. I know how hard you all worked at your exercises every day, so I thought maybe you'd like to watch Humphrey work out." He pulled the cloth off of my cage. There was no reaction. Just unsmiling faces staring at me from all sides of the table. Bert had said I was the entertainment, so I decided to be entertaining. I jumped on my wheel just to get things rolling. Then I leaped up onto my tree branch and began to climb. I didn't dare look at the faces around me, but I heard a little commotion. Next, I dropped down onto the bridge ladder and hung from one of the rungs. "Surprise! Surprise!" I heard chuckles from the people. "Look at that little fellow," someone said. Then I let go and slid down to the floor of my cage. I burrowed into my bedding and temporarily dropped out of sight. "Where did he go?" I heard a voice ask. "Just watch," Bert said. Keeping low to the ground, I tunneled through the bedding and suddenly popped up on the other side of my cage. "Surprise! Surprise!" I squeaked. This time people laughed. When I looked at the faces again, many of them were smiling, and all of them were leaning in to watch me more closely. "Of course, Humphrey doesn't always stay in his cage," Mr. Brisbane said. He opened the cage door and put me in a yellow hamster ball. I hadn't even seen him bring it along. Sometimes Humphrey likes to go for a walk. He gently set me and the ball on the floor. "Go for it, Humphrey." I could see a lot of feet making way for me, so I started walking to propel the ball forward. Since I'd learned how to control my right and left turns, I decided to zigzag across the room. After a while, I looked back and saw that many of the patients were following me. Some of them were helped by people in uniform. Some of them were on their own. "He's over in the corner," a man in a wheelchair announced. Another man waved his cane at me. "Look out, here he comes again." If I had one of those contraptions, I could go anywhere, a woman with a walker said with a laugh. It became a fun game of follow the leader, and I got to be the leader. It was a lovely afternoon, and we all got a good workout. Those serious faces looked a little less serious as my new friends told me goodbye. When it was time to leave, Joyce was very pleased. "Bert, can you stop in my office on your way out?" she asked. That's how I ended up on Joyce's desk while she talked to Mr. Brisbane. Boy, did that work well. Humphrey got them moving like nobody else, she said. Well, he did the same for me, Mr. Brisbane said. Then something amazing happened. Joyce offered Mr. Brisbane a job as the recreation manager. He had worked for Joyce, who was too busy to come up with new and interesting projects for the patients. And they were even going to pay him. Bert accepted, saying he'd have to talk it over with his wife. But he was sure that she would be pleased, and so was I. I feel like I'm in class because there's an interruption right now. My dog keeps pawing at the door to come in, so I'm going to get up for a second, let him in, and then I'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that. So Bert was offered a job. I think Mrs. Brisbane is going to be so happy. That evening, I was back on the living room table when That's my dog getting a drink of water. Not even at school. Look at all the distractions and interruptions we have here. So, anyway, sorry about that. That evening, I was back on the living room table when Mr. Brisbane told Mrs. Brisbane the good news. I'd sure like to go to work every day, he said, and I'd enjoy that work more than I ever liked my old job. What do you think, Sue? Should I take the job? Mrs. Brisbane looked surprised. No, she looked stunned, and then she burst out laughing. Well, what is so funny? Mr. Brisbane asked. Oh, Bert, I've been trying to figure out how to talk to you about this. I still haven't signed my contract for next year. I don't know if I'm going to go back to teaching or not. Why? Bert asked. Well, this is my 30th year, his wife replied. I can retire this year. Oh, Sue, I'm so sorry. I didn't even realize, he said. 30 years? We should have a party or something. Do you want to retire? Mrs. Brisbane sighed. I'd miss room 26 terribly. I'd miss all the wonderful students, especially Humphrey and Ock. On the other hand, maybe it's time for someone else to have a chance at teaching. Am I really making a difference anymore? I had to squeak up. Yes, 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 I shouted. You make a difference every day. Well, Humphrey seems to think so, Mr. Brisbane said, and so do I. If I retire now, I'd be the one home alone all day. Mrs. Brisbane stood up. I'm going to think about this a little while longer. What was there to think about? Sometimes Mrs. Brisbane could be quite frustrating. Sometimes Mrs. Brisbane even made me a little bit mad. But always, Mrs. Brisbane was a really great teacher. Bert spent the rest of the week making plans for his new job. He asked his wife if he could borrow me on the weekends every once in a while. Oh, my students won't like it, Mrs. Brisbane said, but if you tell them it's for a good cause, they might not complain too much. They didn't talk about the contract again for the rest of the week, so I spent many a long night spinning on my wheel and wondering what Mrs. Brisbane would decide. On our first day back at school, Principal Morales dropped by during recess. Mrs. Brisbane handed him the contract. I signed it, she said. The principal smiled. That is a great relief. What did Bert think? Bert took a job and he can't wait to get out of the house, she said with a laugh. It looks like neither of us are going to retire, at least not this year. I was so unsqueakably delighted my heart went thump, thump, thump. I was splashing so much he practically created a tsunami in his tank, so I knew he was happy as well. When my friends returned to the classroom, I watched them take their seats. I thought of how I'd seen Mrs. Brisbane help Saye, Garth, Gail, and Heidi, Seth, Tabitha, and Mandy. Everyone in the class. Did they realize what she had done for them? I was afraid they didn't. I was glad Mrs. Brisbane was coming back. And I felt sad that none of us appreciated her as much as we should. Okay, I will read another chapter tomorrow and post it so you can hear the end. The last chapter is chapter 15, and that'll happen tomorrow, and then we'll be finished with surprises according to Humphrey. All right, have a great day.